Welcome back, Focus Learners. Today, we're diving into a highly requested, incredibly complex geopolitical event. We're unpacking the final conclusion, or, maybe just the precarious pause, of the devastating 2026 US-Iran war. If you're looking for the ultimate explainer on how this all wrapped up, you are absolutely in the right place. Our focus today is purely on the facts. We're going to look at how this conflict rapidly escalated out of nowhere, the absolute global shockwaves it sent out, and ultimately the intense pressures that forced a sudden and highly scrutinized interim peace deal. So as always, we're relying on the data, the timelines, and the direct source material to build a clear, completely impartial picture of what just went down on the global stage.
Okay, let's dive into this. First up, Operation Epic Fury begins. Then we'll cover the global economic shock, the pressures to end hostilities, the interim peace deal itself, and finally, a precarious path forward.
All right, Section 1. Operation Epic Fury and the rapid escalation of February 2026. The sheer speed of how this escalated is just breathtaking. February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launch a massive joint military operation. The U.S. called it Operation Epic Fury, and Israel called it Operation Roaring Lion. We're talking around 200 fighter jets striking 500 targets across 14 different Iranian cities. And crucially, this included a decapitation strike in Tehran that assassinated Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Then, almost immediately, early March, we see the massive regional blowback. Iran retaliates by launching ballistic missiles and drones, not just at Israel, but at U.S. military bases in 5 Gulf states. We're talking Qatar, the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan, along with strikes in Saudi Arabia. And by mid-March, Iran plays its ultimate disruptive card. They close the Strait of Hormuz to global shipping.
Now, to really grasp the eventual ceasefire, we kind of have to rewind and look at the initial goals. Speaking at a Congressional Medal of Honor ceremony and in a video statement, President Donald Trump outlined a super ambitious set of objectives for this war. These included destroying Iran's missile capabilities, annihilating the Iranian Navy, preventing nuclear weapons acquisition, ending funding for terrorist organizations, and ultimately enacting regime change. I mean, this was a sweeping mandate, right? It set an incredibly high baseline for what the U.S. administration defined as victory. Keep these points in mind because we are going to compare them to the final resolution later in this explainer.
Moving to Section 2, the global economic shock, or really the antagonist that forced a ceasefire.
So the absolutely crucial point here is this staggering number, $37.3 billion. According to data from Brown University's Iran War Energy Cost Tracker, this is the direct cost passed right on to American consumers in fuel price increases from just February 28th to early May. The conflict instantly caused a massive spike in global energy markets. For the average person watching this, it meant the war was immediately felt at the gas pump. It wasn't just some distant geopolitical event on the news, it was a daily, painful domestic economic strain.
And when we zoom out to the broader regional damage, the numbers get even more wild. A UN study estimated that Arab nations faced potential losses of up to $200 billion. Saudi Arabia, a global oil giant, was basically forced to cut its oil output by 20%. To put that into perspective, that is 8 million barrels per day just because ships were staying totally clear of the conflict zone. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which is a critical artery for the world's energy, resulted in a frantic race by Gulf importers to reroute their supply chains. Observers literally called it the suffocation of Gulf economies. This created massive pressure from regional allies on all warring parties to just stop the fighting, simply to save the global economy.
Which brings us to Section 3, pressures to end hostilities, focusing on the domestic and military realities. Now, what's really revealing here is the sheer scale of the vulnerability exposed during the retaliation. Based on a Washington Post review of satellite images from early May, at least 228 U.S. military structures or pieces of equipment were damaged across the Middle East. Most U.S. personnel actually had to be moved completely out of regional bases. And on top of that, Washington's military strategy became incredibly complicated when partner countries in the Gulf started pulling back. For instance, Saudi Arabia actually denied the U.S. base and overflight access. That directly contributed to the U.S. having to pause a mission in the Strait of Hormuz, so the military reality on the ground was far, far messier than anyone anticipated.
And this chaotic on-the-ground reality triggered a whole cascade of diplomatic and domestic hurdles. Step 1. On June 3rd, the U.S. House of Representatives passes a War Powers Resolution, explicitly aimed at preventing further escalation without congressional authorization. Step 2.
There's widespread international pushback. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres fiercely condemns the strikes from both sides, stating they completely undermined international peace. Step 3. Recognizing the total deadlock, neutral mediators, specifically from Pakistan, Qatar, and Oman, stepped in heavily. They started pushing for back-channel dialogues in places like Muscat, Oman, desperately trying to avert a broader regional catastrophe.
All right, on to Section 4, the interim peace deal, known as the June 2026 Islamabad Memorandum.
Let's be really clear about what this resolution actually is. The Islamabad Memorandum is a framework agreement mediated by Pakistan and Qatar. It is super critical to understand that this is not a formalized permanent peace treaty, not at all. Rather, it is a 60-day ceasefire extension. It's just a structured pause. The goal of this memorandum is to lay the groundwork and provide a cooling-off period to negotiate a final permanent settlement between the U.S. and Iran, with the actual technical negotiations slated to continue over in Switzerland.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive gap between the start of the war and its interim conclusion. Think back to those sweeping initial goals from February: regime change, annihilating the Navy, destroying the missile program. Now contrast that with the pragmatic, real-world reality of the June deal signed by President Trump and Iranian President Pezeshkian. We just have a 60-day pause. The U.S. agreed to lift its naval blockade on all maritime traffic entering and exiting Iranian ports. And furthermore, the deal actually includes a $300 billion private fund designed to stimulate investment in Iran. It's a stark contrast for sure, and it really highlights how economic and military realities force some very significant concessions.
But hey, despite the compromises, the mediators from Pakistan and Qatar publicly cited encouraging progress. Led by U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and his Iranian counterparts, the talks did yield some immediate, tangible de-escalation mechanisms. They agreed on a framework to end the parallel fighting between Israel and Hezbollah up in Lebanon, and crucially, they opened a communication line to ensure the safe passage of commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz, finally allowing that vital global economic artery to slowly reopen.
Finally, Section 5, a precarious path forward and the lingering unknowns. Let's move to and see how this builds into an absolutely monumental diplomatic challenge. In just a 60-day window, negotiators must finalize solutions for literally some of the most complex geopolitical issues on the planet. They have to establish concrete limits on Iran's nuclear ambitions. They must figure out the disposal of Iran's highly enriched uranium. And on the flip side, they have to negotiate broad sanctions relief and the release of frozen Iranian assets. These are deeply entrenched issues that have defied resolution for decades, and now they're compressed into a 2-month deadline.
And of course, the military tension hasn't just magically vanished. According to a classified U.S. intelligence assessment reported by the New York Times in early May, Iran had already regained operational access to most of its missile sites. Specifically, 30 out of the 33 missile sites located right along the Strait of Hormuz are back online. Because the interim deal doesn't immediately curb Iran's missile program or establish a clear path to dismantling nuclear facilities, nations like Israel are watching with profound alarm. It's a sobering reminder that the hardware of war is still very much in place, fully operational, and pointing at strategic targets.
So what does this all mean? It leaves us with this final, critical question. Will this 60-day window actually forge a lasting, permanent peace settlement, or is the Islamabad Memorandum merely a brief pause in a much longer, forever war? The global economy, regional stability, and millions of lives literally hinge on what happens in those negotiating rooms in Switzerland. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep analyzing the facts, stay focused, and I'll see you next time as we continue to break down the world's most complex events.